at any point you feel comfortable displaying the slides. Fantastic. Good morning. August the 10th, 2010 was not a particularly exceptional news day. If you look at the front cover of the New York Times, there were a number of stories then, particularly interesting things like museum directors who were given tax-free housing perks, the Pentagon cut some budget and some jobs, and some of you might remember there was a JetBlue flight attendant who completely lost the plot and started swearing at everybody in the flight and then jumped out the inflatable slide and made an exit. But the interesting thing about this day was the story that wasn't on the front page of the New York Times. And the real story was this, that more non-human objects and internet-connected devices came online with the US telephone companies, Verizon and AT&T, than human subscribers. In other words, more machines signed up for telephone connections than people. I think when people talk about the Internet of Things, most of the discussion is around machine-to-machine interaction, so machines talking to other machines. I'm sure we're all familiar with scenarios like a washing machine that's connected to your power meter so that your washing load happens at the cheapest times for electricity tariffs, or a car that finds the least congested traffic routes or books itself into the garage for a service, or something simple like a picture frame which draws its images from your gallery in the cloud. And these are great, and this kind of stuff exists today. The thing that particularly interests us at Everything is this idea of people and things, the concept of not just the infrastructure behind the scenes of machines talking to other machines, but of physical objects connected to be able to communicate directly with people. There was a very interesting service that happened last year called Toyota Friends. So this is a hybrid car that effectively can communicate directly with its owner. For example, it can send you an email or a text or some other form of instant message to tell you that the engine needs charging, the battery needs charging, or the tires need pumping up. And you can post those updates. It can automatically post those updates to your social network if you wanted your car posting to your social network. And the point is not so much the use case about that, but the idea that this is really quite interesting. This is then a physical product that has its own sort of personality and its own sort of presence, if you like, on the internet, and has a relationship with the person that owns and uses it. And that's the thing that really interests us. A few years ago, Bruce Sterling sort of famously suggested that quite rightly, that we'd all quite like to sort of Google things if we lose them, our stuff. The problem is, what happens if a product isn't physically connected to the internet, as most of our things aren't? You know, it would cost quite a bit to put GPS chips in all of our shoes. And I think the point is, we want this uber-connected future that Bruce talked about. This idea where everything has a presence online and we can communicate directly with it. I'm not quite sure when it's going to arrive because of the time it takes for these things to become present in all of our physical objects. But in a way, I think this future is already here, and it's here because of smartphones. So in a sense, smartphones are giant sensors that are in our pockets. I'm sure this is not demographically representative of the population at large, but clearly the smartphone penetration stats are extraordinary, and for all intents and purposes, over half the populations now in some European countries have smartphones. So there's a huge amount of us who are connected all of the time, and who have these kind of giant sort of proxies for connectivity with us in our pockets. So in other words, inanimate objects can now become connected to the internet, even if they aren't actually online themselves. And if these objects, these physical products and other objects start talking to us and have interesting things to say, our smartphones can be the receivers to listen to that and kind of communicate with us on their behalves. So our view is that you can, in fact, connect pretty much any product to the internet today, and you don't need to sort of attach tweeting dongles to packets of washing powder to do it, as in you don't need to alter the manufacturing process. Using low-cost, disruptive web technology, you can individually connect products to the internet and effectively transform the experience of buying and owning and using them. The company that I started with some friends is a technology company, and we sometimes use the metaphor of Facebook to describe what our technology does, because we think it's quite a useful reference point. We're all comfortable in this room having Facebook profiles, or leaving aside the extent to which perhaps some of us aren't comfortable having Facebook profiles, but just bear with me. We have Facebook profiles, and while we're here at the conference, sitting here, listening, talking to people, having coffees, a digital representation of us is actually active somewhere on the internet, in the cloud. And we're very used to this idea that we have an avatar of ourselves which exists in the cloud, which is actually doing things while we are somewhere else doing something else. So somebody could be writing on your wall right now, leaving a comment, or tagging you in a photo, or an application on your Facebook profile could be updating with information. And we think that's a really interesting metaphor for what you can do with physical objects, because our software engine effectively gives every physical thing its own identity on the internet, its own Facebook profile, and we call this an active digital identity. So this means that a product or an object can have a physical presence on the internet, its own social life, if you like, online, without actually having to be connected all of the time. Just like Facebook, it allows us to attach content and services to that profile, which then get triggered when the user interacts with it with their smartphone. So I'll give you an example. I used to be in a spectacularly unsuccessful band many years ago. You can probably tell quite how many years ago by the hairline. So I'm going to use an example that's very close to my heart, which is a guitar, but there are many examples of what I mean. So when you buy a guitar at the moment, usually that's where the relationship with the retailer or the manufacturer ends, unless something goes wrong with the guitar. There's a kind of disconnect between the transaction of purchasing the product and the usage of it in your life, which is filled with kind of passion and joy. So supposing after I bought my guitar, I could check into it the way that I check into a location with Foursquare, simply by scanning a tag, which could be an NFC tag or even some 2D barcode with a smartphone. I could check into the guitar using my social identity systems like Facebook or Twitter and instantly activate a digital identity for this guitar. So this guitar now has its own web address, its own URL on the web. And more importantly, by checking into it, I effectively take digital possession of that object and are linking my identity to its. So suddenly, this has a unique profile for this object, the only object the only one of its kind. So it ceases to become a Gibson ES330, and it becomes Andy's Gibson ES330, which we think is very, very different. And by giving it a digital persona, all sorts of applications and services can be triggered. There could be kind of news and reviews, or offers and upgrades, or chord charts of videos of how to play the guitar solo from Another Girl, Another Planet, or whatever it is. And you could have really interesting kind of geosocial connections. So you could have things like an instant band app, where you buy a new guitar and you say you want to form Arcade Fire, so you're looking for the other instruments played by other people in your area who have a similar level of proficiency. All these sorts of things become possible when the objects themselves have identities. And of course, the analytics, the data that flows from them are tremendous. So we are sort of helping companies do this, and also right out of the box, so that the product comes with its own active digital identity and its own social identity to make it really easy to activate. We call this product relationship management. So it's this idea that there's a huge opportunity for value exchange between the people who buy and use stuff, who would like to get lots more out of it digitally, and the people who make and sell it, who would like to offer those extra services to people, but it's not always easy to do that. Effectively, people who make products, we're kind of helping them connect those products with the people who use them and augment them with a whole world of digital services and added value benefits that helps them get more out of them when they're using them in their lives. And there's no reason, we think, not to have a one-to-one ongoing relationship between a product and a customer over the lifetime of that product, and even then when it perhaps has a second life being sold on eBay or what have you. And effectively, this is a relationship between the consumer and the brand, but the product is really the center of energy for it, because people have relationships with the physical things in their lives much more than the brands behind them. And from a business point of view, this clearly makes sense because of the loyalty, the word of mouth, the sales, and so on it generates. So, to sum up, when a consumer sees a product, in this case, I mean, it could be any kind of object, but products are the things we're particularly interested in right now. The message is really that this thing comes with a whole hidden world, a hidden universe of content and services and apps and experiences that can be personalized just for you. And from the retailer or the manufacturer, every individual customer is unique. We know this, but now the products can be unique too. The ID can turn the product effectively into a piece of owned digital media through which personalization can be delivered of the content, the messages, the experience, the apps, all of these things powered by real-time data and social data about how somebody's using it and sharing it and what they're connecting it with. And of course, each interaction creates a richer layer of data. The final point I wanted to make is that our vision of the future of this world is actually all of these individual data streams will start to be able to be mashed up in a sort of horizontal way. So you have this world of kind of super mashups with products, with information from the web, from connecting with each other. And you'll be able to create these really interesting applications that combine these. And just a very simple thing to leave you with, this is something our CTO did, where individual bananas have their own ID. We thought you can't really get much more real world than a banana. And what's interesting is once you give the object its identity, then you can do very simple things, obviously, like track it in the supply chain. So in this case, it's tracking the route from Brazil. And if we change it to individual bars of chocolate, same thing applies, although clearly the supply chain switches to within Switzerland. If you look at something simple, just like a few easy way to integrate something like a Twitter stream, which is then combining people talking about that product on Twitter, there's no reason why that couldn't be people talking about that particular product. And it doesn't have to be chocolate, it can be anything. And I guess my point is, once you give objects and products their own active digital identity with a few lines of code, it's actually very, very easy to start mashing up all sorts of different services and layer on experiences and content for consumers. So the final thing I thought I'd say is that if anyone at the conference tells you that they understand what's going to happen in the future, then my advice is not to believe them. But I will make one prediction, which is that if you thought there was a lot of communication going on the internet today, just wait till all the things start talking. Thank you.